Very good morning and good afternoon to all our dear viewers and listeners outside there. Welcome to another edition of ACFIM Talks, brought to you by Alliance Finance Monitoring, a political finance watchdog. ACFIM Talks runs every Friday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. East African time. My name is Abel Esero and I'm sitting in for Mr. Felix Kafuma, moderating today this show. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe and like all our social media platforms. On YouTube, we are ACFIM On Twitter, follow us and like our handle is ACFIM and on Facebook it's also ACFIM Today we are going to be looking at the role of media exposes in curbing corruption in public institutions in Uganda. The reason why we try to look at why media is trying to do this is because recently we have seen how corruption has become so rampant and the media has played a key role in exposing some of this. So before we proceed, I would like to give a brief background on why we think media is so essential in trying to curb corruption in public institutions. First of all, the media is an essential component of any democratic society. This is because on one hand, it provides information which the politic requires to make responsible and informed decisions, while on the other hand, it performs a checking function, ensuring that the elected officials uphold their campaign promises. In this case, the National Resistance Movement promised to launch a war against corruption in Uganda. So conversely, media improves domestic accountability by putting issues that directly concern the interests of citizens and public institutions on both public and political agenda. Specifically, investigative journalism is one of the tools that can be used to uphold or hold state institutions and government officials accountable for their actions or inactions. Recently, Uganda's Inspectorate of Government, Ms. Betty Kamia, ordered more than 2 dozen of staff of Uganda Bureau of Statistics to refund nearly Uganda shillings 800 million. The officials claim to have spent on fieldwork during the COVID-19 lockdown. This comes after Daily Monitor, a local newspaper, broke several stories on the questionable handling of Uganda Bureau of Statistics resources. Currently, corruption in Uganda's public institution has become so endemic, and annually the country loses about Uganda shillings 20 trillion. That's about 5.2 billion in dollars in corruption, as the Inspectorate of Government survey report indicated in 2021. So today I'm going to be joined by two journalists who have a very good background in the area of media and reporting and also exposing the issues of corruption. I will be joined by Mr. Moses Mulondo, who is currently serving as the president of Uganda Parliamentary Press Association. Mulondo holds a degree in mass communication and masters of business administration, both that were gotten from Makerere University. He is also the New Vision's leading senior staff writer on the issues of the national budget. Mr. Mulondo, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eseru Abwe.
We shall also be joined by Mr. Pius Mutekani Katunzi, who is a lawyer and writer. He's a journalist who has been practicing journalism for over 25 years. He is also the managing director, stroke editor of the Observer newspaper since 2019. Mr. Pius has not yet joined us, but we expect him to join us shortly. So I will start with you, Mr. Mulondo. Despite the central role of media in democracy and accountability, media organizations in Uganda have not been investing enough in stories on corruption and malfeasance. Why has this been the case in your view?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I think we need to be fair to the media because much of the corruption that has been exposed in this country has been exposed by media houses. Of course, there are some limitations in the course of us doing our work. One of which is that the many media houses do not have enough operational funds to undertake such big projects, especially when it comes to investigations. And that's why many of us have been advocating for public financing for the media. We are called the fourth estate. Journalism is a public good which should be accessed free of charge or at a highly subsidized rate. So in Uganda and many other African countries, the media houses do not get enough funding. Actually, not only Africa, the world over, even in the UK, the Guardian newspaper was almost closing and it had to resort to public donations for its survival. So many countries actually give subsidies to the media, even in the USA. The other thing that happens in the USA, which is not in many other countries, that they have rich foundations which contribute money to the media houses to make them more autonomous, more independent financially to be able to do their watchdog role. Between 2009 and 2011, foundations in the US contributed about $3 billion as donations to media houses. In Uganda, we do not have such entities that can help media houses, and that is why many of us are pushing for public financing for the media. The same way money is put in the national budget to fund political parties, including opposition political parties. We need money to be put in the national budget to fund the media, to make the media more independent and more vibrant in executing its cardinal mandate of the watchdog role. That said, of course, like I said in the beginning, the media industry in Uganda has played a very fundamental role in exposing so much corruption that has been going on in many government entities. Of course, it is one thing to expose, and it is another thing for action to be taken. And it is not only, of course, the media that exposes. There are many other players that have been exposing corruption. Parliament plays a very fundamental role, especially accountability committees of Parliament. But even committees that are not accountability committees, sectoral committees, like in the recent past, the Sectoral Committee of Trade and Industry, which is headed by Mpaka Mwine, has exposed a lot of corruption in Solot Sugar, Solot Fruit Factory, a lot of corruption in many other entities. But it investigated the Vinci Coffee deal. So Parliament plays a very fundamental role, the committees of Parliament, in exposing corruption. You've seen what Kosase has been doing, you've seen what Park has been doing. But of course, the other dilemma is that in the course of fighting corruption, there are many incidents of members of different committees of Parliament being compromised, and you've seen those reports where uh, members of Parliament are accused of getting bribes from different accounting officers that they are supposed to hold accountable. Civil society, like ACFIM, play a very fundamental role in fighting corruption. I have seen a number of reports ACFIM has released on especially political financing, on holding political parties accountable in regard to the funds that they receive. And so many other players, whistleblowers in these different entities, government entities, they help us to expose corruption. Actually, yesterday was International Whistleblowers Day for celebrating people who volunteer information to the public to expose the bad dealings that are going on in the entities where these people are working. Much of the corruption that, of course, is exposed by the media is from these whistleblowers that tip us and tell us there is some corruption happening here, and that corruption is exposed. But also, There is so much corruption that goes on unreported. There is so much corruption that happens behind the scenes, and the public never gets to know. Even the media never gets to know. Like I told you in the beginning, that the media in Uganda needs some empowerment, especially financially, but also training, and we need civil society groups and different entities that have experience in fighting corruption to build the capacity for the media in taking the battle of fighting corruption to another level. As I conclude on that, we also have to think about the environment in which we are operating. Our political environment is highly corrupt. A big number of our politicians thrive through corruption, through bribery, through deals. Actually, our politics is highly commercialized because many people who thrive, they use colossal sums of money for them to go through. I have seen a number of reports that actually ACFIM has released on this, on the commercialization of our politics. And when you, for a person to become a member of parliament, I saw the reports indicating that someone has to use between 300 and close to 1 billion shillings. Where they get all this money, certainly this is money that this is money. Let me put my phone in silence. This is money that in most cases is obtained through fraudulent ways. And so when you have such people getting into leadership positions, it becomes extremely difficult for them to fight corruption. And sometimes, by the way, like you said in the beginning, that we lose about 20 trillion shillings to corruption every year, according to the IGG's report. That is a lot of money, and it could even be understated. For us to be able to make some serious progress in the fight against corruption, of course, it would have to take a political will from those who are in government. You saw what happened in Tanzania when Magufuli became president of Tanzania. Magufuli undertook a lot of radical measures to curb corruption, and reports indicated that the money that was saved from the money that was going to corruption and wastage, it caused the development budget for Tanzania to rise from 26% to 48%. Tanzania was also able to undertake a number of infrastructure projects, including their standard gauge railway, on their own money without going for loans. So you can imagine a lot of progress can be realized when a country succeeds in fighting for corruption, especially when there is political will. When there is no political will, even the rate of exposing the corruption that goes on will be very limited, because it becomes greatly highly risky to expose corruption. I'm sure you know. So that's what I can say on that question, Mr. Eseb. I'm waiting for more questions.
Thank you so much, Moses. You talked about media is a public good, and one of the things that is limiting media to do its work effectively is finances. But when you look at the state-owned media, people expect a lot to come from them, because at least some of them they do get some resources from government. And
That is a very good one.
people are
And
questioning why is it that most of the exposes that we are seeing on media is not coming from state-owned media, it's coming from private owned. Why is that the case? Why is the state
uh,
media not doing its work effectively in terms of exposing corruption in public institutions?
I would say yes and no. To some extent, yes. Of course, as far as New Vision is concerned, where I work, I don't know so much about UBC, but as far as New Vision is concerned, New Vision has exposed a lot of corruption, a lot of corruption. And I think New Vision should be commended that whereas it's a government newspaper, it has exposed a lot of corruption that goes on in different government entities. But of course, even from what many studies have indicated, there are limitations for state-owned media in exposing corruption because you know that their editorial independence is very weak, is very limited. They are controlled by these very powerful people in these government entities who are corrupt. So many times there are stories that never see the light of the day when they had already been worked on and they are about to be published, and some calls come in and the stories are never published. So, to be realistic, of course, there are always limitations for state-owned media in exposing corruption because the corruption that is exposed in most cases it relates to people who are powerful in government and they have in most cases a lot of influence and control over state-owned media. But I can tell you, as far as New Vision is concerned, I am sure you know you have seen a number of reports, a number of exposures of corruption going on in different, and actually many times we've had a number of New Vision journalists who have been kidnapped by some powerful people in government, and some have even been threatening to sue us. These reports have been there. So New Vision has done a lot of commendable work in exposing a lot of corruption that goes on within government entities. But like I told you, and according to so many studies, there will always be limitations for state-owned media houses in exposing corruption. But even private media houses, they have a lot of limitations. They are those who are within government who are corrupt can always interfere with their work. You remember how for so long Monitor was denied adverts from government entities because partly they were exposing a lot of corruption that was going on in government entities. So even private media houses, there is a lot of interference coming from authorities within government entities as they do their work, and that's a very common problem, not only in Uganda but in many other countries.
Thank you. You talk about something that is so touching in terms of those powerful individuals and also the editors especially are not independent and they don't sometimes do their work independently because there are some other forces that come into play to try to influence or hamper their work. For example, we have received various reports that some stories can decide to be killed by either those editors are bribed or they are threatened. How big is that problem in the media industry?
In countries like ours, of course, developing countries where even democracy is at the infancy stage, where good governance is also work in progress, such incidents are so many. Those interferences are so many, and like I told you, media houses here depend a lot on adverts from government, and without those adverts, they can only crumble. So, but also there are many other powerful players who are not government necessarily, like private companies, multinational companies that give adverts to the media houses, and if they have any illicit transactions or deals that are not in the interest of the public, sometimes the media, including the private media, may not be able to expose these dealings because of such factors. So that is why many of us continue to advocate for public financing for the media, because if we have public financing for the media, that would greatly promote the independence of the media and giving them the capacity to even fight such powerful players that are responsible for their economic survival. If money is put in the national budget to fund the media, it will greatly help us in this fight against corruption.
You've touched on the question of how some of the journalists are sometimes threatened and or kidnapped. I want to know from you in terms of accessing information, especially related to corruption. I know it's a very hard task sometimes to access that information. How are journalists maneuvering through all the hurdles that they face, they find in on ground, and each time they're trying to access corruption-related information from these public institutions?
That's why I told you in the beginning, by the way, that so much corruption goes on and it never gets reported, partly because of the intricacies in accessing information in different government entities. I can give you an example, even if for you, Alliance for Finance Monitoring, you have a mandate to follow up on the finances that go to political entities and how these funds are utilized. I am sure you have found so many hurdles in accessing accountability reports. I remember one time I hosted your executive director, Henry Guzi, and he was recounting on how they had faced difficulties in accessing information that is within the files of the electoral commission, because political parties are supposed to file accountability reports to the electoral commission. So when you go, even as the media, we have many times attempted to access this information and we fail. So you would wonder why the electoral commission does not freely share this information, because political parties are public entities that are supposed to be accountable to the public, and their accountability reports, their financial reports should easily be accessed by the public. But also, I have not seen any single political party, whether those in the opposition or the ruling party, that has freely released its accountability reports to the public to take to raise a high standard for accountability. So you see, those are the challenges that we have. Access to information in different government entities is still a very big challenge. But I think it's an area that we need a number of discourses on how to go about it, because it's even against the laws of the country. We are supposed to have access to this information that is within the public entities, but many times we make attempts and we fail, and that is why I told you that a lot of corruption goes on, and it is the public never gets to know.
Thank you, Moses. Now, there's one interesting thing which I want to know from you, because I know corruption, especially investigating corruption and reporting on corruption, is a very risky job for journalists and media organizations. And we have seen, as you already hinted on earlier, the issues of like they can threaten you and they kidnap you, even in certain cases they can do away with your life if you're a journalist. I want to know from you whether media organizations in Uganda have mechanisms on how they are helping journalists and also themselves as organizations in mitigating some of these threats and attacks from those they or public institutions or public officials they do investigate.
Um, the mechanisms, which mechanisms? Of course, the the protection that we have is that these corrupt officials fear to be exposed, and in as much as they can issue threats, they know how powerful the media is. There is an American philosopher, Malcolm X, who said the media is the most powerful entity on earth. The media has so much power. So, um, in the course of these people making these threats, of course, they know the repercussions, and that is why many of them, the methods they use are actually to compromise. That is the main tool they use. When they get to know that you have a story you are working on that is going to expose them, they can call you or engage your bosses to ensure that the story never comes out. It is under very limited instances that they would do that they would use the threats. So in most cases, they will try to compromise you and give you money, and you sit on the story. Or if they fail to convince you, they go and engage your bosses, and the story never sees the light of the day.
So have bosses tried maybe in terms of if they see, because that is likely to compromise the independence of also media institutions, because the public expects the media, which is like an eye, their eye, the eye to the public in terms of seeing and exposing some of these corruption cases. If they get to know that now the media organization colludes with some of these corrupt officials and the story is killed, have media organizations tried to resist some of this because there are some of these powerful forces that come in and try to ensure that any story that comes and tries to blackmail them or depict them as a bad institution, the story is killed. What has media done in terms of ensuring that such things don't
But
happen?
by the way, I need to tell you that the media, in most cases, is even when the either editors or writers are approached, they have always gone ahead to publish these stories. And I can tell you, like in Parliament, where I am, I have seen many instances where an individual or entity that is being probed makes an attempt to compromise journalists in the way they will be reporting on that story. And many times, journalists have rejected those pleas from those entities or individuals to cover up, and they have exposed them and chosen angles that expose the dirty dealings that went on. So the media naturally plays a very fundamental role of watchdog, of carrying out oversight, of exposing the wrong dealings that are going on, because we are the eyes and the ears of the public. For us, we have played our role as the media with some limitations notwithstanding. But I can tell you, as a country, we are not making progress in fighting corruption, especially because those who are in authority have not done enough. And I have seen international reports indicating that we are actually worsening as a country in our ranking. I saw the Transparency International report. We were put in position 144 out of about 180
Right.
countries that were assessed. Even on the African continent, the average score was about 33 points, but Uganda's score was only 22 points. So that tells you that, certainly going by those reports, Uganda is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And we are losing a lot of money that would be going towards improving the lives of the ordinary Ugandans. Sometimes, some few years back, Catherine Babugemeire did some investigations about money that is sent to UNRWA, which for so many years has been getting a big portion of the national budget. And in their report, they indicated that about 90 trillion that had been allocated to UNRWA for roads, out of 90 trillion, 4 trillion had been stolen. And the report indicated that the 4 trillion was stolen out of connivance between government workers and the contractors. And so you can imagine 4 trillion out of 90 trillion. So there is a lot of corruption that goes on. I remember former Minister for Ethics and Integrity, Dr. Butulu, once said if we could end corruption that is going on in government entities, we would not even need to borrow money for government activities. We would be using our own money, which to a very great extent Magufuli had achieved in Tanzania when he had successfully fought corruption. He reduced the rate at which Tanzania was borrowing. For us now, our public debt has reached 73 trillion, which is a lot of money, and increasingly the biggest portion of our national budget goes to debt repayment. There is too much borrowing, but if we could reduce corruption, we would not be borrowing at that rate. So as a country, it's a very big challenge that we have, but majorly the ball is in the hands of our political leaders, those who are in parliament, those who are in the executive, the president, and these cabinet ministers. Because even the anti-graft agencies that we have, like IDG, Auditor General, they have released so many reports and implicated so many officials and made a number of recommendations for action to be taken, and action is never taken. I remember there was a time Parliament even passed a resolution for some accounting officers to be sacked after they had been involved in so many corruption scandals, after they had failed to account for colossal sums of money. But the appointing authority never sacked these accounting officers and they continued to serve. So, even as the media, we've exposed a lot of corruption in different government entities, but action is never taken by the relevant authorities, especially the executive, to purge and put things right. And that is the very big challenge that we are facing as a country.
Thank you, Moses. We are going to go for a break and then we shall return with the next segment.